Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is we're going to talk about solubility. And the solubility of substances, if we go back to previous classes, is really for molecular compounds, this concept of like dissolves like. And so what this means is that if I have a polar substance, it can only be dissolved in other substances that are polar. If I have a nonpolar substance, then that substance can only be dissolved in solvents that are also nonpolar. Now for this class, we had three sort of categories in terms of polarity of substances. We had substances that are polar or very polar, substances that are slightly polar, and substances that are nonpolar. And so understanding this concept of solubility is important to understand this process of solvent extraction. So in a previous video, we talked about fractional distillation and how we can separate substances using the technique of fractional distillation, and that's for crude oil. What we can also do to separate substances from one another is we can use something called solvent extraction. And so what I'll do is if I've got a mixture that's got substances that are polar, slightly polar, and non-polar maybe mixed together, and I can't really separate them very easily, what I can do that kind of solves that problem is if I want to pull out the substance that's polar, if I wash that mixture with a polar solvent, then that polar solvent will dissolve the polar substance that I'm trying to get out. I can wash it with this polar solvent, extract the solvent out of the substance, and it will have that polar substance dissolved in it, and then as I evaporate out the solvent or whatever I need to do to separate the two, then I now have this polar substance separated from these other substances that are in the mixture. And so understanding that if you're doing solvent extraction, you have to follow this concept of like dissolves like. So if I want to extract a slightly polar substance out, I have to use a slightly polar solvent in order to do that.